The stark, crimson, "just married" sign was still taped to the window of the rental house, a cheerful mockery against the gloom inside. I sat alone on the edge of the bed, the satin of my mother's borrowed dress slick and cold under my palms. The entire night had bled away while I waited. Across the hall, the low murmur of a voice and the occasional delicate laugh seeped under my door. My husband of 7 hours, Captain Mark Turner, was in there, with his cousin Chloe. A deep, familiar ache bloomed in my chest, one I hadn't felt in decades. Not since my death. Yet here it was, fresh and vicious. I was back. The impossible had happened. I had drawn my last ragged breath in a sterile, lonely hospital room, my body eaten by a cancer I couldn't afford to fight, and opened my eyes to this, my wedding night. The night Mark chose to play nurse to Chloe's scraped knee, leaving me to the silence and the gathering frost of my own realization. In that first life I'd cried until dawn. I'd believed I was lucky. Evelyn Shaw, daughter of a shopkeeper and a seamstress, marrying the promising West Point officer from a good family. It was a match my parents had scraped and sacrificed for, a social climb that had everyone telling me how grateful I should be. So I became grateful. I made myself small, agreeable, sensible. That night I learned the price of being sensible. It was the currency of my exploitation. The door creaked open just as the first gray light touched the window. Mark stood there, still in his dress uniform trousers and a wrinkled white shirt. He looked tired, but it was a satisfied tiredness, the kind earned from a duty performed. "You're still up," he said, not a question but an accusation. As if my vigil was an inconvenience. I lifted my eyes. His face, all sharp angles, blonde hair military neat even now, blue eyes that once made my heart stutter, now looked like a museum exhibit. A relic of a foolish past. The spell was broken. All I saw was the impatient set of his jaw. "I was waiting for you," I said, my voice calm, flat. It didn't sound like my own. The old Evelyn's voice would have been thick with tears. He paused, his brow furrowing. He'd expected hysterics or sullen silence. This detached calm unsettled him. Chloe was really shaken up. It was a bad fall. I had to stay until the sedative the doctor gave her worked. "The doctor came?" I asked, a faint, bitter smile touching my lips. A scraped knee worthy of a house call on his wedding night. The narrative was already being crafted. The fragile cousin, the devoted protector. "Yes. She's asleep now." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture annoyed. "Look, Evelyn, don't start. She's family. She's alone here for the wedding." What was I supposed to do? The word sensible hung in the air between us, unspoken but potent. "Be sensible, Evelyn. Understand. I'm not starting anything," I said, turning away. The fatigue of a lifetime, not just a night, settled into my bones. "Go to sleep, Mark." I didn't wait for a response. I slipped off my shoes, pulled back the stiff new bedspread and lay down, turning my back to his side of the bed. I heard his frustrated exhale, the rustle of clothes as he undressed down to his shorts, the dip of the mattress as he lay down, rigid, a full foot of space between us. The chasm felt oceanic. I didn't sleep. My mind, sharpened by decades of regret and the clarity of death, was a whirlwind. I wasn't here to renegotiate a bad contract. I wasn't here to win his love or compete with Chloe. I was here on a rescue mission. The hostage was myself. My dowry. That was the key. In my parents' eyes, it was a nest egg, a piece of security for their daughter in a prestigious but uncertain military life. To Mark's mother, Diana, it was community property the moment I said, "I do." In my first life, they'd taken it all by noon the next day, the $400 in cash my mother had sewn into the lining of my suitcase, and the precious department store gift certificates meant for furnishing our first home. I would not let that happen again. As the room lightened, I heard the symphony of my new life begin. The faint, whimpering voice from the guest room, the comforting, cloying tones of Diana cooing, "They're there, my poor darling." I moved silently. Easing out of bed, I went to my suitcase, a sturdy new thing with a little brass lock. I opened it, the scent of my mother's lavender sachet briefly cutting through the alien smell of this house. I pushed aside folded sweaters and linen, my fingers finding the carefully disguised seam at the bottom. A few tugs and I pulled out the plain white envelope. The crisp bills and the bright, colorful certificates were still there. A small fortune in 1983. My lifeline. I tucked the envelope into the waistband of my slip, securing it against my skin. Then I took several sheets of newspaper from the bottom of the suitcase, crumpled them tightly and filled the now empty hiding place. I smoothed the lining back down, restored the contents and closed the case. Only then did I face the vanity mirror. The face that stared back was young 22 with clear skin and wide brown eyes. But the eyes. The youthful sheen was gone, replaced by a cold, flinty sharpness. The eyes of a woman who had already died once. A fist pounded on the door, not a knock. Evelyn. The day's half gone. Don't think marrying an officer means you can laze about like a society wife. Get out here and start breakfast. Diana's voice was a drill sergeant's. I didn't flinch. I picked up my hairbrush and began to slowly drag it through my tangled hair, counting the strokes. The door burst open. Diana filled the frame, hands on hips. She was a handsome woman, her blonde hair in a stiff bouffant, her eyes the same ice blue as Mark's, but without any of the fleeting warmth his could sometimes show. Are you deaf? I've been calling you. I met her gaze in the mirror. You should try knocking, Diana. It's considered polite. The color rose in her cheeks, a mottled red. She was speechless for a full 3 seconds. Mark appeared behind her, already dressed in casual khakis and a polo, his face dark. Evelyn apologized to my mother. Now. I set the brush down and turned to face them. For stating a fact, this is my room. A room. Privacy is a basic expectation. Your room. Diana spat, finding her voice. Everything under this roof is mine, girl. Including you. Now enough of this nonsense. Mark needs to speak with you. Mark stepped forward, attempting an expression of reasonable authority. Evelyn, we need those gift certificates from your parents. Chloe's understandably upset and her dress from last night is ruined. We want to get her a new one today to cheer her up. And there was. Right on schedule. I feigned confusion. My gift certificates? For Chloe's dress. Diana couldn't contain herself. Of course, for Chloe's dress. The poor child came all this way, suffered a trauma in your home, and you'd begrudge her a new dress? What kind of selfish creature are you? They were a gift to me, I said, my voice still quiet, lethal in its calm. From my parents. For our home. You are the home now, Diana retorted, marching toward my suitcase. What's yours is the family's. Now stop being difficult and hand them over. Mother, Mark said, a warning note in his voice. He looked back at me, his tone softening into the persuasive cadence he used to get his way. Evie, be reasonable. Chloe's like a sister. This is a gesture of goodwill. I'll pay you back when I get my next paycheck, okay? I almost laughed. His paycheck, which was already earmarked for his father's debts and his brother's tuition, would somehow repay hundreds of dollars in exclusive store credit? When will that be, Mark? I asked, tilting my head. And will your payback cover the value? Those certificates are for Jordan Marsh. They're not just for fabric, they're for furniture. His jaw tightened. I'd struck a nerve, questioned his ability to provide. His facade of reason cracked. Damn it, Evelyn, why do you have to make everything so hard? Just give me the certificates. No, I said, the word clear and final in the tense room. A shadow moved in the hallway. Then Chloe appeared, leaning against the door jamb as if standing were a tremendous effort. She was pale, her pretty face arranged in an expression of pure anguish. A single, perfect tear traced down her cheek. Mark. Diana. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't fight. Not over me. I don't need a new dress. Really, I don't. She looked at me, her eyes swimming. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. Please keep your things. I'll be fine. She was a masterpiece of victimhood. And Mark swallowed it whole. His face transformed, all his anger toward me crystallizing into protective fury. Look what you're doing to her, he hissed at me. Are you completely heartless? They're just pieces of paper. Then buy her some with your own pieces of paper, I said. Diana saw her opening. You ungrateful little shrew. After everything we've done for you. If you won't contribute to this family, you can forget about breakfast. You can go hungry. I looked at the three of them, the angry mother, the manipulative cousin, the guilt-tripping husband. A perfect toxic triangle. The disgust that rose in me was clean, purifying. I took a deep breath and then I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. All right. You want them so badly. I walked to my suitcase, making a show of reluctance. I could feel their collective gaze, hungry and triumphant. I unlocked it, dug around, and pulled out the small, flat wooden box where I'd originally kept my few pieces of good jewelry. I shook it gently. It rattled with the newspaper. They're in here, I said, holding it out. Diana snatched it from my hands, fumbling with the catch. She flung it open. Silence. Then a shriek that could shatter glass. Newspaper. It's garbage. She upended the box, shaking it wildly. Nothing but crumpled newsprint fluttered to the floor. She wheeled on me, her face purple. Where is it? Where did you hide it, you little thief? Mark was on me in 2 strides, his hand locking around my wrist like a vice. Evelyn. Explain. Now. I wrenched my arm free, rubbing the red marks his fingers left. Explain what? You all watched me take that box from my own suitcase. If something's missing from it, the thief must have come last night. I let my gaze drift meaningfully to Chloe. The house was rather busy. Chloe's face went sheet white. Are you accusing me? I didn't name anyone, I said coolly. Enough. Mark roared, pulling me aside. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. This ends now. Hand over the money and the certificates, or I swear, our life together will be hell. I looked at him, at the stranger who had been my husband. Mark, I said softly, our life together became hell the moment you walked out of this room last night. I walked past him to the closet and took out a small pre-packed duffel bag. What are you doing? He asked, weariness and fury warring in his tone. Leaving, I said. Diana snorted from the doorway. Running back to mommy and daddy to tattle? You walk out that door, don't you dare come crawling back. I wasn't planning on it. I unzipped the duffel's front pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it deliberately, holding it up for them to see. A one-way train ticket. Boston to Miami. Departing at 11:05 a.m. The shock in the room was palpable. Mark's breath left him in a rush. Diana's mouth hung open. Chloe looked genuinely frightened. How did you get that? Mark stammered. While you were reading Chloe bedtime stories, I said, refolding the ticket. I didn't hide the certificates, Mark. I cashed them in. For this ticket and for travel money. The lie was smooth, meant to destroy their last hope. You cashed them in? Diana screeched, trembling with rage. You ruined them. Evelyn, have you lost your mind? Mark lunged for my duffel bag. You are not leaving. We just got married. Do you have any idea what this will look like? What it will do to my career? I sidestepped him. Your career. Always your career. I reached into the bag again and pulled out another sheet of paper, slapping it down on the dresser. Don't worry. I've solved that problem for you. It's a formal request for a marriage annulment, citing non-consummation and undue pressure. You file it with your CO. I'll sign whatever needs signing. You'll be free and clear. The word annulment hit them like a physical blow. In their world, in the tightly knit, image-conscious military community, it was a nuclear scandal. Far worse than a quiet divorce down the line. You wouldn't dare, Mark breathed, his eyes wide with horror. Try me, I said, shouldering my duffel bag. If you try to stop me or if that paper isn't filed, I will go straight to your commanding officer myself. I'll tell him all about your devoted night-long vigil with your cousin. I wonder what the JAG office would make of that. His face went from red to a sickly gray. He knew the rumors alone could derail everything. Diana looked suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. I didn't wait for their next move. I walked to the bedroom door. The morning sun from the hall window was blinding. You vicious bitch. Diana hissed, but she didn't move to stop me. She didn't dare. Mark just stared, his hands clenched at his sides, a monument to thwarted authority. I stepped into the hallway, the duffel bag light on my shoulder. It held everything I now owned in the world. It was everything I needed. I didn't look back. The slam of the front door behind me was the most profound sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just a door closing. It was the ceiling of a tomb, the one where the old Evelyn Shaw had been buried alive. The morning air in the quiet military housing cul-de-sac was cool and sweet, smelling of cut grass and damp concrete. Felt like my first true breath in years. A few early rising neighbors were out, Mrs. O'Leary with her watering can, old Mr. Henderson fetching his newspaper. They stared, their curiosity a physical touch. The girl in the wedding dress from 2 days ago, now in a simple skirt and blouse, hauling a duffel bag down the driveway at dawn. I kept my spine straight, my chin level. I offered no explanation, no tearful, downcast eyes. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Their gossip was a world I was leaving behind. The walk to the bus stop was a meditation. With every step, the ghostly chains of my past life, the need to please, the fear of scandal, the crushing weight of should, fell away, clattering on the sidewalk behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt focused, a knife blade honed to a single purpose: survival on my own terms. The bus, then the commuter rail, then the bustling chaos of South Station in Boston. The noise was a symphony of freedom, the clatter of suitcases, the crackling PA system, the murmur of 100 different lives intersecting. I bought a cheap cup of coffee and a newspaper, found a bench far from the main flow and waited. My hand kept straying to my waist, checking for the reassuring crinkle of the envelope. My $400 and my Jordan Marsh certificates. In 1983, it was a small fortune. A seed. When the announcement for my train came, a final sharp thrill of fear cut through me. What are you doing? You have no plan, no place to go. He'll find you. Phil. It was the voice of the old Evelyn, the sensible one. I crushed it. Failure was dying alone on a Medicaid ward. Anything else was a gamble worth taking. I boarded the train and found my seat by a window. As the engine groaned and the platform began to slide away, I pressed my forehead to the cool glass. There was no face in the crowd, no last-minute dash. Mark was too proud, too calculating. He'd be at his mother's kitchen table, strategizing damage control, figuring out how to spin the story of his unstable runaway bride. The thought almost made me smile. As the city dissolved into suburbs, then into the ragged industrial outskirts, and finally into the green blur of New England forests, the adrenaline began to ebb. In its place rose a tide of memory, not the sharp tactical memories of yesterday, but the deep, painful scars of the life I'd lived. I saw myself 5 years from now handing my entire teacher's salary to Diana, who would tisk and say, a military wife should support the household. I saw myself a decade later wiring the money my parents scrimped to send me for a new winter coat to Mark, because his brother had an opportunity. I saw the look on my mother's face years later still, when she visited and saw the shabby curtains, the worn furniture, while Chloe pranced in a new dress, courtesy of my hidden savings. The worst memories came unbidden, playing against the backdrop of rushing trees. The first stabbing pain in my side dismissed as stress. The doctor's quiet, concerned recommendation for tests. Mark's impatient sigh. Evelyn, is probably nothing. We can't afford to go chasing hypochondria. The deductible is astronomical. The pain worsening, a constant grinding companion. Calling his base on a Friday evening, my voice thin with fear, only to be told by a sympathetic clerk that Captain Turner had signed out for the weekend, to help his cousin move into her new apartment. Her new apartment. The one the money I'd saved by skipping lunches and mending stockings had furnished. Then the cold, bright horror of the hospital room. The diagnosis. The treatment plan with a price tag that seemed fictional. Diana's visit, her face pinched. The family simply doesn't have reserves for something like this, Evelyn. You understand? Medical bills are a bottomless pit. And Mark standing behind her, not meeting my eyes. He brought me a magazine. As if Vogue could cure metastatic disease. The final memory was not my own. It was the ghost memory, the one I carried from after. Floating, invisible, above the cozy living room of a tidy little condo. Chloe curled on a sofa I had picked out, laughing. Honestly, Mark, it's sad, but it's also a blessing. Can you imagine the drain if she'd lingered? And Mark handing her a glass of wine, touching her shoulder. You always see the bright side. The rage that memory used to bring was gone. Now, watching the telephone poles whip past, I felt only a vast, cold clarity. That was the price of my sensibility. That was the reward for my gratitude. Tears came then, silent and hot. I let them fall. They weren't for him or for the betrayal. They were a funeral dirge for the girl who believed love was earned through endless sacrifice. I cried for her and then I wiped my face clean. She was gone. The journey took 2 long days. I slept fitfully, my bag wedged between me and the wall, my hand on my money. I ate packaged sandwiches and watched America change outside the window, the granite and brick of the north giving way to the sandy soil and pine of the south, then finally to the flat, watery expanses of Florida. When I stepped off the train in Miami, the wall of humid heat was a physical shock. It smelled of diesel, salt, and blooming things I couldn't name. It was nothing like the crisp, ordered world I'd left. It was chaotic, vibrant, loud, and teeming with people who didn't know me and didn't care. It was perfect. My first task was to disappear. Evelyn Shaw, the dutiful officer's wife, needed to vanish. At a busy stationery store I bought a cheap notebook. On the first page I wrote, Eve Sterling. Eve for the new beginning. Sterling for the strength and value I intended to claim. It felt right. I found a room for rent in a faded but clean Art Deco building in a neighborhood called Coconut Grove. The landlady, a formidable Cuban woman named Maria, looked me up and down, asked no personal questions and accepted 2 weeks' rent in cash. No noise, no men after 10, you keep clean, she stated. I nodded. It was a better contract than marriage. The room was small with peeling mint green paint and a ceiling fan that wobbled hypnotically. It was mine. I locked the door, placed a chair under the knob, and finally, for the first time since my rebirth, I let my shoulders slump. I was exhausted to my bones. But there was no time to rest. I spread my resources on the thin chenille bedspread. $382 left after travel and rent. $100 in Jordan Marsh gift certificates. Useless here but a form of stored value. And my knowledge. My sewing skills, honed over a lifetime of making do and mending. My memories of trends, not what was in style now but what would be. The big shoulders, the neon colors, the ripped jeans and leggings that were still years away from mainstream America. Miami in 1983 was a city of contrasts. On South Beach, crumbling old hotels stood next to trendy new cafes. The air pulsed with a new kind of music, electrifying, synth-driven beats from the radio. The people dressed differently. Bright colors, less fabric, an awareness of the body that was scandalous in the conservative military circles I'd left. I spent days walking, watching, absorbing. I saw boutiques selling flashy, poorly made club wear for exorbitant prices. I saw tourists in baggy, unflattering resort wear. The opportunity was in the gap. There was a hunger for style, for something fresh and bold, but the market was either cheap trash or expensive designer imports. I could bridge it. I had the eye and I had the hands. My first investment was not fabric but a machine. In a dusty pawn shop on Flagler Street, I found a used Bernina sewing machine. It was heavy, built like a tank, and cost me $75. The pawnbroker threw in a box of threads and bobbins. My next stop was the Fabric District, a chaotic, colorful stretch of Little Havana. With another $60, I bought bolts of vibrant rayon sturdy cotton for jeans, and, as a reckless splurge, several yards of electric pink spandex blend. I carried it all back to my room on the bus, my arms aching. Maria saw me struggling and, without a word, helped me carry the Bernina up the stairs. "You make dresses?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "I'm going to try," I said. That night, under the glow of the single bare bulb, I began to sketch. Not the modest shirts and A-line skirts I'd made for myself before. I drew the clothes I remembered from magazines I'd pored over in waiting rooms. High-waisted, tight-legged jeans, off-the-shoulder tops with ruched sleeves, short, boxy jackets with dramatic shoulder pads. I mixed Miami's vibrant palette with the coming silhouette of power. I worked until my eyes burned. I drafted patterns on brown craft paper, my movements sure. This skill at least my first life had given me. I cut into the electric pink spandex, my shears slicing with a satisfying whisper. For a week I barely left my room. The whir of the Bernina became my heartbeat. I existed on coffee, rice, and beans from the fonda down the street. I made 3 complete outfits. The pink spandex leggings with a matching cropped, sleeveless top, a pair of stone-washed high-waisted jeans with a sharp taper, and a bold off-the-shoulder striped top in turquoise and white. They were unlike anything in the store windows. They were daring. I held them up, critical. Were they too much? Was I fooling myself? There was only one way to find out. Maria had mentioned an open-air market on Saturday nights by the marina, where artists and vendors sold their wares. It was my target. Saturday evening, I packed my 3 pieces on hangers in a garment bag, my heart thudding against my ribs. This was the first test. If this failed, I had enough money for another month's rent and little else. The ghost of failure whispered again. I told it to shut up. The marina market was a carnival of light and sound. Paper lanterns were strung between palm trees, reggae music spilled from a boombox, and the air smelled of grilled shrimp and incense. I paid the $10 vendor fee for a small space at the end of a row of tables, next to a girl selling beaded jewelry. I hung my 3 pieces on a makeshift rack I'd fashioned from PVC pipe. For the first hour, nothing. People flowed past, their eyes sliding over my creations without seeing them. A few snorted. "What is that?" I heard one woman whisper to her friend, nodding at the pink leggings. "Halloween." My confidence, so fierce in my quiet room, began to leak away. This was a mistake. Miami wasn't ready. I was a nobody with ridiculous ideas. Then a pair of women stopped. They were in their late 20s, dressed in the Miami uniform of the moment, designer jeans and silky blouses. But their hair was bigger, their makeup more dramatic. They looked like they worked in fashion or maybe at a fancy hotel. The taller one, with a cascade of dark curls, reached out and touched the fabric of the striped top. "This is interesting," she said, her voice carrying a New York accent. "The cut. It's not like the crap they're selling on Ocean Drive." Her friend, a sleek blonde, held up the pink leggings. "This is wild. Can you try this on?" she asked me. I don't have a changing room," I stammered, my vendor facade cracking. The brunette laughed. "Honey, no one does here. Just hold it up." I held the leggings against my hips. The blonde studied the line. "What do you call your line?" she asked. The question threw me. I hadn't thought of a name. My eyes darted to my notebook sitting on the table. "Eve Sterling." "Sterling," I said, the name feeling solid on my tongue. "This is from Sterling." They bought both the striped top and the pink leggings, paying cash without haggling over my prices, which I'd set high, hoping for half. As they walked away, the blonde called back, "Be here next week. I have friends who'll want to see this." I stood there, the $112 in my hand, feeling more valuable than any sum I'd ever held. It wasn't just money. It was validation. A crack of light in the door of a new world. I sold the jeans 20 minutes later to a tan Swedish tourist who said they were very Berlin. Packing up my empty rack that night, my bones ached, but my spirit was soaring. I had done it. I had made something from nothing. The path was still shrouded in fog, but I had taken the first crucial step. As I walked back to my room, the warm night air embracing me, I thought of Mark, probably in some officers' club, telling a carefully edited version of our story. I thought of Diana and Chloe, stewing in their righteousness. They felt a million miles away. They were ghosts in a cold, receding past. Here in the humid, pulsing dark of Miami, Eve Sterling was just getting started. The next 3 months were a blur of fabric dust, aching fingers, and the relentless rhythmic purr of the Bernina. The $112 from that first market night was my rocket fuel. I reinvested every cent, buying more fabric, better quality thread, professional-grade dressmaker's shears. My tiny room in Maria's boarding house transformed into a sweatshop. Sketches papered the walls. Bolts of fabric leaned in the corners like silent partners. The air smelled permanently of sizing and steam from the second-hand iron I'd salvaged. Maria, my landlady, became my first business advisor. She'd knock on my door with a plate of ropa vieja and plantains, her sharp eyes taking in the progress. "The pink it sold, yes. So make more, but in blue and purple. People are like parrots, they see a color, they all want it." He was right. I began to think in collections, not just single pieces. The Saturday night market at the marina became my laboratory in my storefront. My spot at the end of the row grew a following. The New York woman, Anya, became a regular, bringing friends from her PR firm. They were my walking advertisements, my trendsetters. Through their feedback, I refined my designs. The shoulders got a little broader, the waists a little higher, the colors even more saturated. I started using brand labels ordered from a catalog. A simple, clean script that read Sterling. I wasn't just selling clothes. I was selling an attitude. Confidence. A break from the past. My customers, mostly young women, tourists, and the city's burgeoning club scene devotees, responded to it. They didn't just buy a top. They bought a piece of the fearless energy I was pouring into every stitch. The cash flow was steady but exhausting. I was designer, cutter, seamstress, saleswoman, and accountant. I worked until 2 a.m., slept 4 hours, and started again. The ghost of cancer that haunted my memories was a potent motivator. This time my body would not break from neglect for others. It would be strong from building my own future. One sweltering Wednesday afternoon, drowning in an order for 10 pairs of pegged acid wash jeans, I finally admitted I needed help. Maria heard me muttering curses in English and Spanish over a jammed bobbin. "Nina, you are killing yourself," she stated, hands on her wide hips. "My niece, Sophia. She is good with her hands, she needs work. She is quiet. You pay her fair, she will help." Sophia was a wisp of a girl of 19, with huge, watchful eyes and fingers that moved with a preternatural speed and grace. She sat at the second sewing machine I'd managed to buy, a temperamental old singer, and within a day her seams were straighter than mine. A week later I hired her friend Rosa to handle cutting and finishing. My one-woman operation became a tiny studio. The scale changed everything. With their help I could finally think beyond the next market. I began approaching small boutiques in Coconut Grove and Coral Gables. The rejections were numerous, often dismissive. Too flashy. Not our customer. But then a breakthrough. A daring boutique on Espanola Way called Electric Paradise bought 6 pieces on consignment. They sold out in 2 days. The owner, a flamboyant man named Felix, placed an order for 20 more. Sterling was no longer just a market stall. It was a wholesale brand. The physical and mental strain was immense, but it was a clean, honest exhaustion. It belonged to me. I was too busy to dwell on the past until the past came knocking. It was a Tuesday. I was in the studio, really just my and the girls' crowded workspace, pinning a pattern onto deep red crepe de chine. The buzzer from the front gate downstairs rang. Maria usually answered, but she was out. Sophia looked at me questioning. "I'll get it," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. It was probably a fabric delivery. I pushed the intercom button. "Yes. Evelyn." The voice crackled through the cheap speaker, but there was no mistaking it. Steel wrapped in velvet. A voice from a nightmare. "Mark." My blood turned to ice water. For a second, the humid Miami air vanished and I was back in that cold bridal room. I gripped the edge of the table. "Who is it?" Sophia asked, concerned. "No one," I whispered, but it was too late. "Evelyn, I know you're there. Mark. We need to talk." His tone was calm, reasonable, the one he used when he was most dangerous. "Let me in." Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. How had he found me? I'd been so careful. I'd left no trail. I'd become Eve Sterling. Then I saw it. In last Sunday's Miami Herald lifestyle section, a small column about local up-and-coming designers at the Marina Market. They'd used a photo. Me smiling, holding up one of my sequin jackets. The caption read, "Eve Sterling, a new voice in Miami fashion." The picture was grainy, but it was unmistakably me. My success had found me first. I pressed the intercom again, my voice miraculously steady. "You have the wrong address." "Don't do this," he said, the reasonableness fraying. "I've come a long way. I'm your husband. Just let me in so we can talk like civilized people." The word husband was a slap. I looked back at Sophia and Rosa, their faces pale with confusion. I couldn't let this poison into my sanctuary. "Wait there," I said. I didn't take my apron off. I wanted him to see me as I was now, a working woman with chalk on my hands and pins in my collar. I walked downstairs and out the front gate into the blinding afternoon sun. He stood on the cracked sidewalk, a silhouette of military bearing. He was thinner, his face tanned and harder, but still heartbreakingly handsome in his crisp civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt. He looked out of place, a statue of order in the chaotic, lush vibrancy of the grove. His eyes swept over me, taking in my simple tank top, my practical shorts, my bare feet in sandals, the apron. His expression flickered from relief to confusion to a hint of disgust. "Evelyn," he breathed, stepping forward as if to embrace me. I took a step back. "It's Eve." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "What are you doing here, Evelyn?" "Living in some boarding house." He said it like it was a leper colony. "I live here. I work here. What do you want, Mark?" "I want my wife to come home," he said, his voice low and intense. "This little rebellion has gone on long enough. Do you have any idea the trouble you've caused? The rumors." He tried to reach for my arm. "Let's go somewhere and talk. You can get your things." I yanked my arm away. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I sent you the papers. Are they filed?" His face darkened. "Of course they're not filed. I told you I don't believe in divorce. You made a vow. We'll work through this. I've been patient, but this." He gestured at the peeling paint of Maria's house, at the general bohemian disorder of the street. "This charade ends now. You're coming back to Boston with me. Tonight." A laugh, brittle and humorless, escaped me. "You're not listening. I'm not yours to retrieve. We're done." His control snapped. "You selfish little bitch," he hissed, stepping closer, his bulk crowding me. "After everything I've given you, the security, my name, and you throw it away to play dress up in a slum? You humiliate me and my family, and you think there are no consequences." The venom in his words was familiar. It was the same tone Diana used. I felt the old, instinctive flinch, the desire to make myself small. But the woman who would have flinched was gone. "The only consequence I care about," I said, my voice icy, "is you leaving. Now." "Or what?" he sneered. "You'll call the police? Tell them your lawful husband is asking you to honor your marriage? Good luck with that." We were drawing a scene. A neighbor across the street had come out on her porch. Sophia and Rosa were watching nervously from my upstairs window. I was about to speak, to threaten him with every legal term I'd researched but wasn't sure I understood, when another voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" The voice was calm, deep, and carried a quiet authority that didn't need to shout. We both turned. It was the man from the ground floor apartment, the one Maria had mentioned owned a small construction business. I'd seen him in passing, tall, maybe in his late 30s, with sun-streaked brown hair and the weathered, capable look of someone who worked with his hands. He wore paint-splattered jeans and a white t-shirt. He was wiping his hands on a rag, his gaze fixed on Mark. "This is a private matter," Mark said, turning his officer's stare on the newcomer. "Between me and my wife." The man didn't blink. He looked at me. "Eve, this guy bothering you?" The use of my chosen name, my real name here, was like a lifeline. "Yes, Ryan." "He is." Ryan took a few steps closer, not threatening, but his presence was solid, immovable. "You heard her. Time for you to leave." Mark's face flushed with outrage. "Who the hell are you? This is none of your business." "I'm the landlord," Ryan said, his voice still even. "And it's my business when someone harasses my tenants on my property. You need to go. Now." "She's my wife," Mark ground out as if it were a magic incantation. "Doesn't look like she wants to be," Ryan observed. "And being a husband doesn't give you the right to assault her or trespass." "Assault? I haven't laid a hand on her." "You were about to," I said quietly. "I know the look." Mark stared at me, then at Ryan, his mind calculating. He was used to a chain of command, to deference. This civilian defiance, this protection of my space, was alien and infuriating. "Evelyn," he said, switching tactics, his voice dropping to a pleading register that had once fooled me. "Please, come home. We can fix this. Whatever this is." He waved a dismissive hand at Ryan, at the house. "It's beneath you. You're an officer's wife." "No, Mark," I said, finding a final, unshakable core of certainty. "I'm not. I'm Eve Sterling. And this is my home. Get off my property." The phrase "my property" seemed to jolt him more than anything else. The idea that I could own anything, even a rented room, separate from him. He looked from my resolute face to Ryan's implacable one, to the gathering audience on the street. He saw no victory here, only a messy, public defeat. "This isn't over," he whispered, the words meant for me alone, laced with a promise of future trouble. He shot Ryan a look of pure, venomous hostility. "You have no idea what you're interfering in." Then he turned on his heel and strode down the sidewalk, back rigid with fury, until he turned a corner and was gone. The second he disappeared, my knees buckled. I swayed, and Ryan was there in an instant, a steadying hand on my elbow. "Whoa, easy," he said. His hand was warm, rough with calluses. "I'm okay," I breathed, though I wasn't. The confrontation had lasted 5 minutes but drained me of a day's energy. "Thank you, Ryan." "Really?" "Don't mention it," he said, dropping his hand. He studied my face. "You want me to call the cops? File a report just to have a paper trail?" I shook my head. "No. It would just complicate things. He's military. It becomes a whole thing." He nodded, not pushing. "You know where to find me if he comes back." He gave me a final, assessing look, then nodded toward the house. "Get some water. You look pale." Back upstairs, Sophia and Rosa descended on me with questions in rapid Spanish. I gave them the abbreviated, sanitized version. An unhappy past, a man who couldn't let go. They clucked sympathetically, their eyes wide. To them it was a telenovela drama. To me it was a chilling reminder that my old life had long, grasping tendrils. That night I couldn't sleep. Mark's face, his promise, "This isn't over," echoed in the dark. I had been naive to think a train ticket and a new name were enough. He saw me as property. And men like Mark didn't relinquish property without a fight. Sensible Evelyn would have hidden, would have run again. But Eve Sterling had too much to lose now. A business, a team, a life I was building with my own sweat. I couldn't run. I had to end it. Permanently. The next morning I went to the Miami Public Library. I spent hours in the musty silence researching military divorce law, annulment, and what constituted conduct unbecoming. I found the name of a lawyer downtown who specialized in family law with a focus on military cases. He was expensive. I didn't care. I hired him with a thick stack of cash. I told him everything. The cold wedding night. The financial coercion. The emotional infidelity with Chloe. My flight. Mark's harassment. I didn't want alimony. I didn't want his money. I wanted a clean, legal, and final severance. Given the circumstances, particularly his refusal to file and his pursuit, we can petition for divorce on grounds of constructive abandonment and emotional cruelty, the lawyer, Mr. Finch, said, peering over his glasses. But to get it through the military courts quickly and prevent him from dragging it out, we need leverage. What kind of leverage? Anything that shows a pattern of behavior that reflects poorly on his judgment as an officer. The situation with the cousin is suggestive but not proof. His coming here, threatening you, could be construed as harassment, especially if we have a witness. I thought of Ryan. I didn't want to drag him into it, but he was the only one. I have a witness, I said quietly. Good, Mr. Finch said. I'll draft a letter to his commanding officer with copies to the JAG office. We'll outline our petition and formally notify them of his harassing behavior during what should be a period of marital separation. It will light a fire under him. The military does not like its officers embroiled in messy domestic disputes. It's bad for discipline, worse for morale. It felt ruthless. It felt like war. And for the first time I was on the offensive. I signed the papers. I paid the retainer. As I left the cool, polished office for the humid street, I felt a different kind of weight lift. I was no longer just hiding or defending. I was acting. I was using the system he revered to break his hold on me. Walking back to the Grove, I passed a storefront for rent. It was on a busy corner with big windows that flooded the space with light. A sign, faded, still hung in the window. Psychic readings. I stopped and peered inside. It was dusty, empty, perfect. My mind, so focused on ending the past, suddenly leapt into the future. Sterling needed a home. A real one. Not a market stall, not a corner of my bedroom. A place with a door I could lock with my name on the lease. I noted the realtor's number. Mark had come to pull me back into a gilded cage. Instead, his appearance had galvanized me to build a fortress of my own. The game had changed. He just didn't know it yet. The letter from Mr. Finch was my declaration of war, sent not with a bang, but with the crisp, authoritative rustle of legal letterhead. I didn't wait for the fallout. I had a fortress to build. The storefront on the busy corner of Commodore Plaza became my obsession. The realtor, a skeptical man with a gold pinky ring, looked me up and down, a young woman in homemade clothes asking about commercial leases. You have business references? A financial backer? He asked, tapping his clipboard. I have cash for the deposit and first 3 months' rent, I said, meeting his gaze. And a business that's outgrowing my living room. I showed him my ledger, the neat columns of sales from the market and the consignment checks from Electric Paradise. The numbers were small but showed a sharp, upward curve. He raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. The lease was signed under the name Eve Sterling, DBA Sterling Apparel. My hands only shook a little. It was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I'd ever done. The monthly rent was a staggering sum, a deep bite out of my capital. Failure meant losing everything. But the alternative, staying small, staying vulnerable, was no longer an option. Ryan, my quiet neighbor, became an unexpected ally. When he saw me hauling buckets of soapy water into the empty space the next day, he appeared in the doorway, tool belt slung low on his hips. Need a hand? He didn't ask for explanations. He just saw a job that needed doing. Over the next 2 weeks, in the evenings after his own work, he helped me tear out moldy carpet, patch walls, and sand the old heart pine floors until they glowed. He taught me how to use a power sander, his hands guiding mine when the machine tried to buck away. We worked in comfortable silence mostly, the air filled with the smell of sawdust and sweat. He hasn't come back, Ryan said one evening as we were painting the walls a clean, bright white. It wasn't a question. No, I said, rolling a smooth stroke of paint. Your lawyer's letter must have done the trick. Good. He dipped his brush. A man who tries to bully a woman doesn't like being met with bigger bullies. The military's the biggest bully of all. I glanced at him. There was a story there in the set of his shoulders, the careful neutrality of his tone. But I didn't pry. We all had our ghosts. The store came together. I designed and built simple modern clothing racks from plumbing pipes. Sophia and Rosa helped me sew floor-length curtains of raw silk for the dressing rooms. I found a vintage Art Deco mirror with a gilded sunburst frame and hung it as the centerpiece. The final touch was the sign. A local metalworker fashioned it, Sterling in sleek, polished steel letters. I hung it above the door the night before the opening. It caught the street light and glowed. The grand opening was a blur of nerves and adrenaline. Anya, my PR friend, had worked her magic, getting a blurb in the Herald's hot list. Felix from Electric Paradise sent a massive bouquet of tropical birds of paradise. Maria came with a posse of her cousins, all talking loudly in Spanish and buying up the boldest pieces. And people came. They wandered in off the sun-drenched street, drawn by the clean windows and the splash of color inside. They touched the fabrics, exclaimed over the sharp cuts and vibrant hues. The register rang again and again. By the end of the day my new stock was decimated and my cash box was heavy. I sent Sophia and Rosa home with generous bonuses, their faces tired but glowing with pride. Alone in the store, locking the door as the violet dusk settled over the grove, I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. The reflected sterling shone back at me, superimposed over the quieting street. I had done it. I had built a door and I had shut it firmly on the world of Evelyn Shaw. The peace held for a month. The store found its rhythm. I hired a sharp, fashionable college student named Leah to help with sales, freeing me to focus on design and production, which we'd moved to a small rented studio space in the back. The orders from other boutiques started trickling in, then flowing. I was negotiating with a fabric rep for a bulk discount. Life was a hurricane of work, but it was my hurricane. Then the letter came. Not from Mark, but from my distant cousin Beth back in Massachusetts. Her looping, familiar handwriting on the envelope sent a jolt through me. Eve, I hope it's okay to call you that. News travels even up here. I heard about your store from your mom. I thought you should know what's happened. Mark's divorce petition finally went through. The military approved it fast. Too fast, according to my friend who works at the base. They said it was due to conduct unbecoming. He got a formal reprimand on his record. Nothing public, but it killed his promotion to major. The word is he was livid. He applied for discharge almost immediately. He's out. His mother Diana took it hard. She blamed that Chloe girl for everything, said she ruined her son's career with her dramatics. They had a screaming match in the grocery store, can you believe it? Diana had some kind of attack afterwards, a minor stroke people say. He's home, needs a lot of care. Chloe packed up and left town. No one knows where she went. The whole family is a mess. Just thought you'd want to know. I'm glad you got out. Be happy, Beth. I read it 3 times sitting on the stool behind my sleek new counter. The words should have brought vindication, a fierce, hot joy. That I felt a hollow chill. A chapter was closed definitively with the official stamp of the U.S. Army. Mark's career, the thing he valued above all else, was broken. Diana, the architect of my misery, was imprisoned in a half-functional body. Chloe, the delicate poison ivy, had been ripped away. They had received their consequences. Not by my direct hand, but by the inevitable collapse of the rotten structure they'd built. My escape had removed the foundation, my money, my compliance, my silent endurance. Without it, they had turned on each other and crumbled. There was no satisfaction in it. Only a profound, weary relief. It was finally, truly over. The ghost of my past life could stop haunting me. It had dissolved into the mundane tragedy of its own making. I folded the letter and tucked it away in a drawer. I didn't keep it. I had no need for souvenirs from that war. The news seemed to break a final, invisible barrier within me. The last lingering fear that he would appear again, that the past could reclaim me, evaporated. I was free. Not just legally but in my soul. My energy for the present became boundless. Sterling blossomed. A buyer from a department store in Atlanta came, loved the line, and placed a sizable wholesale order. It required a leap I wasn't sure I was ready for. Hiring a professional seamstress, investing in industrial equipment. I lay awake nights, my mind churning with numbers. The next morning Ryan was outside my store examining the facade. Signs holding up good, he said. Ryan, I said, an idea crystallizing. You know about commercial spaces. I need to rent a small warehouse. For manufacturing. He turned, his green eyes assessing. You're going big. I'm trying not to drown. He nodded. I know a place. Near the river. Not fancy but solid. Owner owes me a favor. I'll take you. That afternoon he drove me in his pickup truck. The warehouse was perfect. Raw, spacious, with good light. With Ryan vouching for me, the lease terms were fair. As we stood in the echoing space, the potential was almost overwhelming. It's a lot, I said softly, the sound bouncing off the concrete. It is, he agreed. He leaned against a steel column watching me. You can do it, Eve. You've got the hardest part already. What's that? The vision. And the guts to bet on yourself. He said it simply, a statement of fact. There was no pity in his eyes, no condescension. Just respect. A warmth spread through my chest, different from the fever of ambition. It was steadier, deeper. With the warehouse secured, the next year was a marathon of growth. Sterling ceased to be a boutique label and became a proper brand. I hired a production manager, a fierce Italian woman named Gianna who could wrangle seamstresses and deadlines with equal skill. I designed my first cohesive collection for the following spring, Neon Noir, A mix of sleek black separates slashed with vibrant lime and hot pink. The night of my first real fashion show held in a raw space in the design district, I stood in the shadows backstage, my heart hammering. Models in my clothes darted past, their hair sculpted into dramatic waves. The bass-heavy music pulsed. Anya squeezed my arm. "You ready?" I looked out at the crowd, buyers, journalists, Miami's glittering social set. I saw Ryan near the back, dressed in a simple dark suit, a quiet island in the sea of flash. He gave me a slight nod. "Ready," I said. The show was a sensation. The clothes, the energy, the story of the self-made designer, it was catnip for the press. The next day my tiny studio was flooded with calls. Orders doubled, then tripled. A national fashion magazine wanted to do a feature. In the whirlwind that followed, Ryan was my anchor. He never tried to insert himself into the business, but he was there. He fixed the plumbing when the warehouse sink burst. He built office shelving with his own hands. He listened when I fretted over fabric delays or difficult buyers, offering calm, practical advice. He became the first person I wanted to tell both my triumphs and my fears to. One evening, months after the show, we were on the rooftop of his building, sharing a beer and watching the city lights glitter against the black velvet of the bay. The success was still new enough to feel surreal. "It's strange," I said. "I spent a lifetime being told I was asking for too much, that I should be grateful for scraps. Now I'm building an empire from scraps." "You're not building it from scraps," he said, his voice quiet. "You're building it from you. That's the strongest material there is." I looked at him, really looked at him. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting into the sun, the strong line of his jaw, the quiet certainty in his gaze. This man had seen me at my most vulnerable, covered in paint and fear, and had never once made me feel small. He'd simply offered a hand and then kept offering, asking for nothing in return. The attraction I'd been carefully ignoring for months surged forward, undeniable. It wasn't the dizzying, desperate infatuation I'd felt for Mark. This was quieter, stronger. A recognition. "Ryan." I started, unsure what to say. He set his beer down. "Eve," he said, and the way he said my name, my real name, held everything. "I'm not a complicated man. I build things that last. I fix what's broken. And I know what I want." He reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "I want you. If you'll have me." There were no grand promises, no poetry. Just a statement of intent, solid as the concrete foundations he poured. In that moment it was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard. I didn't answer with words. I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was a kiss of discovery, of coming home to a place I didn't know I'd been searching for. It tasted of salt air, honesty, and a future we would build together as partners. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. "Okay," he whispered, a smile in his voice. "Okay," I echoed, smiling back. The following year passed in a contented blur of work and love. Ryan moved his construction office into part of my warehouse, a symbolic and practical merging of our worlds. We were a team. Sterling launched a diffusion line, more affordable but just as sharp. We bought a small, sun-drenched house in the Grove with a courtyard garden. I thought of my past life less and less. It was a ghost story that had lost its power to frighten. I was too busy living. Then I received the invitation. The governor's office was hosting a major economic development conference in Tampa, showcasing Florida's most promising entrepreneurs. Eve Sterling of Sterling Apparel was on the guest list as a speaker. It was recognition on a level I'd never dreamed of. I bought a new suit for the occasion, a tailored ivory silk ensemble from my own professional collection. I felt like myself, only more so. The conference was a whirlwind of speeches, handshakes, and business cards. After my panel on building a brand from the ground up, I was buzzing, surrounded by well-wishers. Needing a moment of quiet, I slipped out to the grand lobby of the hotel to wait for the car service Ryan had arranged. That's when I saw her. A woman was being escorted out of the hotel's elegant restaurant by two stern-faced managers. She was arguing, her voice a ragged scrape. "I just want to talk to him. He's expecting me. You don't understand." She was painfully thin, her clothes, a cheap synthetic blouse and skirt, were wrinkled and stained. Her hair, a dull, brassy blonde, hung in greasy strings. But it was the eyes, wide with a desperate, frantic energy, that I recognized. It was like looking at a grotesque caricature drawn by a hateful artist. "Chloe." She stumbled on the plush carpet, righting herself. Her gaze swept the lobby and locked onto me. The change in her face was instantaneous. The frantic anger melted into blank, utter shock. Then a dawning, avaricious hope. She wrenched free of the manager's light hold and lurched toward me. Evelyn. Evelyn. Oh my God, it's you. The managers moved to intercept, but I held up a hand. It's all right. They stepped back wary. Chloe stopped a few feet away, her eyes devouring me, the sleek suit, the pearl earrings, the aura of belonging in this opulent place. I saw the calculation, the envy, the resentment, all battling with her desperate need. Evelyn, please, she whimpered, the old manipulative tremor back in her voice, but now it was cracked and broken. You have to help me. Just a little. For old time's sake. Why are you here, Chloe? I asked, my voice calm, detached. I saw your picture. In the paper. About this conference. She hugged herself, a pathetic gesture. It's been so hard. After everything fell apart. Marquis. He's not the man I thought. He drinks. He gambled everything away. We came down here trying to find work, but... She trailed off, her eyes begging for pity. We're living in a motel. A bad one. Please. Just alone. You have so much now. So she'd found him. Or he'd found her. They deserved each other and they destroyed each other. The poetic justice was perfect and utterly empty. Old-time sake? I repeated, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. What old times would those be, Chloe? The time you monopolized my husband on my wedding night? Or the time you took the money from my medical care to buy a sofa? She flinched as if struck. The mask of victimhood slipped, revealing the furious, entitled creature beneath. You were always so selfish. You never understood him. You never understood us. That money was for our future. And look at you now, hoarding it all, looking down on me. Her voice was rising, attracting stares. The hotel managers tensed. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a profound, weary distaste. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my wallet and extracted 5 $100 bills. I didn't hand them to her. I let them fall onto the polished marble floor between us. That's not for you, I said, my voice clear and cutting. That's for a bus ticket. Back to whatever town spat you out. Don't come looking for me again. I turned my back on her. I heard her gasp, a sharp intake of breath, then the sound of her scrambling for the money. I didn't look back. I walked towards the glass doors where my car had just pulled up, a sleek black town car. Ryan was there, having driven up to surprise me. He held the door open, his concerned eyes taking in the scene behind me. I slid into the cool, quiet interior. He got in beside me. Everything okay? He asked, taking my hand. It was steady. As the car pulled away, I caught one last glimpse in the side mirror. Chloe was on her knees on the hotel steps, clutching the money, her face contorted in a scream directed at our vanishing car. She looked like a wild animal, cornered and furious. I turned away and leaned my head on Ryan's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around me. It's over, he said softly, kissing my temple. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of him, sawdust, soap, safety. Yes, I whispered, and I finally, completely believed it. It's all over. Outside, the lights of Tampa glittered like a galaxy of hard-won stars. The past was a distant, silent country. The road ahead was bright, and it was mine. The encounter with Chloe left no scar, only a final, confirming chill like touching a tombstone. It was proof the past was truly dead and buried. The money I'd thrown at her feet was a burial fee, the last cent I would ever spend on that life. Returning to Miami, to Ryan and our sun-drenched house and the humming warehouse that was the heart of sterling apparel, felt like crossing a border into my true country. The haunting was over. Now there was only building. The national magazine feature titled The Sterling Standard, From Runaway Bride to Fashion Empire, hit newsstands. It was a sensation. They'd captured the narrative perfectly. The escape, the grit, the self-taught genius, the vibrant Miami aesthetic. Overnight, my small brand became a national story. The orders didn't just pour in. They flooded, a tidal wave that threatened to drown my carefully scaled operation. We need to triple our production capacity, Gianna, my production manager, said one morning, her face pale as she slammed down a stack of purchase orders from department stores in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Triple. By yesterday. I stood in the middle of the warehouse floor, the sound of 24 industrial sewing machines a deafening symphony. The air smelled of hot motors and new cloth. My stomach clenched, not with fear but with a fierce, sharp exhilaration. This was the precipice. Leap or fall. Ryan found me that evening, sitting on the floor of our living room, Blueprints and financial spreadsheets spread around me like a paper fortress. He handed me a glass of wine and settled on the floor beside me, his shoulder warm against mine. "Talk to me," he said. "I need a new factory. A big one. Not another rental. I need to buy." The words felt huge. "I need specialized cutting machines, a proper design studio, a shipping department. The payroll. It's astronomical." I showed him the projected numbers. The profit was staggering, but the upfront investment was terrifying. He studied the figures, his builder's mind assessing. "You're looking at industrial real estate. That's a different league. You'll need investors or a hell of a bank loan." "I don't want investors," I said instantly. The thought of ceding control, of having to answer to a board, made my skin crawl. "I've done it alone this far." "You're not alone," he corrected gently, tapping a line on the spreadsheet. "But you're right. Investors would want to water down your vision." "Alone then." He pointed to the equity in our house, the value of the Sterling brand itself. "You have the collateral. And you have the track record. It's risky. The biggest one yet." I looked at him, at the steady certainty in his eyes. He wasn't telling me not to do it. He was just laying out the terrain. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll fail owning a factory," he said with a small shrug. "And you'll figure out what's next. But you won't fail. This." He gestured at the blueprints, at the numbers. "This is just the next logical step. You've already done the impossible. This is just math and steel." His faith was the final cornerstone I needed. The next week, I marched into a meeting with the vice president of commercial lending at First Florida Bank. I wore a severe black sterling suit, my hair in a tight chignon. I presented not just my explosive sales figures, but a 5-year business plan, market analysis, and the magazine article framed on the conference table. "You're asking for a lot of faith, Miss Sterling," the VP, a man named Henderson, said, steepling his fingers. "I'm not asking for faith," I replied, my voice cool. "I'm presenting an opportunity. Sterling is a phenomenon. It's filling a gap in the market for bold, high-quality, American-made contemporary wear. This loan isn't to start a business. It's to fuel one that's already taken off. The risk isn't in lending to me. The risk is in letting a competitor snap up the market share I'm offering you a stake in." I saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. He was used to men in ties talking about widgets. I was a woman in fashion talking about conquest. I got the loan. The acquisition of a 40,000 square foot light industrial building on the Miami River was a blur of legal documents and contractor meetings. Ryan's company won the bid for the renovation. Watching him in his element, orchestrating crews, solving problems with quiet efficiency, filled me with a pride that was entirely separate from my own ambition. We were building our future side by side, his in concrete and steel, mine in silk and vision. 6 months later, Sterling Apparel moved into its new home. The launch party was an event. The local news came. Models clad in the upcoming Archipelago collection, flowing linens in sea glass colors, weaved through guests sipping champagne under the vaulted ceilings of the cutting room. Anya, now my de facto head of PR, beamed. "You've gone from a market stall to a monument, darling." It was that night, amid the celebration, that he found me. I was on a small mezzanine overlooking the main floor, taking a moment to breathe it all in. The hum of success below was a tangible thing. A figure detached from the shadows near the stairwell. My breath hitched. For a disorienting second I thought it was Mark. The height, the build. But no. This man was older, wearier, his clothes hanging loosely on a frame that had lost its military starch. His face was lined with bitterness and cheap whiskey. But the eyes, the icy blue Turner eyes, were the same. Mark. He looked like a ghost, a revenant from a storm I thought had long passed. He stared at me, his gaze traveling over the pearl gray couture gown I wore, the diamonds at my ears, the aura of unassailable success that clung to me. "Evelyn," he said, the word a hoarse scrape. A cold serenity settled over me. This wasn't the terrifying confrontation on my old doorstep. This was a pathetic epilogue. "Mark, you shouldn't be here. I read about it. The factory." He took an unsteady step forward. The smell of alcohol reached me. "All this. You built all this." It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation. "I did." He shook his head, a slow, disbelieving motion. "With my money. My family's standing. This empire. It's built on what you stole from us. Your dowry. My career. My name." A laugh, short and utterly without humor, escaped me. "Your name? I buried that name, Mark. I built this with the money my parents gave me that your mother tried to steal. I built it with my 2 hands in a room you'd be ashamed to walk into. Your career ended because of your own conduct. You have no claim here. Not to my success and certainly not to me." His face twisted, the handsome features contorted by years of resentment. "You were my wife. You owed me your loyalty. Your life. Instead you destroyed me. You and that lawyer. You poisoned everything." He was shouting now. Heads were turning below. I saw Ryan break away from a conversation, his eyes narrowing as he located me on the mezzanine and started moving toward the stairs. "I didn't destroy you, Mark," I said, my voice dropping, lethal in its calm. "You were a hollow man. I was just the mirror that finally showed you your own reflection. And you couldn't stand the sight." He lunged then, not at me but toward a large-scale architectural rendering of the factory mounted on the wall. He grabbed at it as if to tear it down. "This is mine. It should have been mine." 2 of Ryan's foremen, big men who'd been enjoying the party, were there in an instant. They didn't rough him up. They simply flanked him, their presence immovable. Ryan reached the top of the stairs, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Time to go," Ryan said, his voice low. It wasn't a suggestion. Mark struggled for a moment, then sagged, the fight draining out of him. He looked from Ryan's protective stance to my impassive face, and something in him finally broke. The rage dissolved into a baffled, profound despair. "You were nothing," he whispered, the words meant to wound but falling flat. "I made you something." "No," I said the final word. "I was always something. You just never bothered to look." Ryan nodded to the foreman. They escorted Mark, unresisting now, down the stairs and out of the building. The party's buzz had died. All eyes were on me. I took a deep breath, smoothed my gown and walked to the railing. I offered the crowd below a small, composed smile. An unexpected drama for the evening. But every good story needs a villain from the past, don't you think? Please enjoy the champagne. The show must go on. A ripple of laughter, then applause. The moment passed, the music swelled again. Crisis averted, image intact. But inside, a final, silent door had slammed shut. Later, in our car heading home, Ryan held my hand tightly. "You want me to make sure he's on a bus out of the state?" I shook my head, watching the city lights streak by. "No. He's finished. Seeing what I've become. That was a worse punishment than anything we could do. He has to live with that ghost." And I knew it was true. Mark would carry the image of me in that gown in my factory, surrounded by my success for the rest of his days. It would eat at him more thoroughly than any addiction. His revenge was his own irrelevance. The incident, far from harming Sterling, added a layer of myth to the brand. The story of the scorned ex-husband's dramatic crash at the factory opening circulated in fashionable whispers, only enhancing the legend of Eve Sterling, the woman who could not be broken. With the specter of Mark finally laid to rest, my focus became absolute. Sterling wasn't just a business anymore. It was an institution. I launched a line of handbags and shoes. I licensed the name for a signature perfume, Eve, with notes of night-blooming jasmine and sea salt. We expanded into Europe, opening a small flagship in London's Covent Garden. The years began to fold into one another, a tapestry of work, love, and growing influence. Ryan and I married in a small, sun-drenched ceremony in our courtyard, with only Maria, Sophia, Anya, Gianna, and a few others present. We exchanged simple platinum bands. His kiss felt like a promise written in stone. We talked about children, but my body, bearing the hidden scars of a past life illness I'd never had in this one, held a deep, unconscious trepidation. We decided to wait. There was still so much to build. My parents, who had feared for me after my dramatic flight, finally came to visit. They walked through the factory, their shopkeeper eyes wide with awe. My mother touched a bolt of silk I'd had specially woven in Italy, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Evie," my father said, his voice thick. "You really did it all yourself." Their pride was a balm I hadn't known I needed. One afternoon when I was 35, I was reviewing sample swatches for our 10th anniversary collection when a dizzying wave of nausea hit me, followed by a deep, dragging fatigue. I dismissed it as stress, but it persisted. A visit to the doctor, then a battery of tests. I sat in the specialist's office, the model of calm success in a sterling suit, my heart a trapped bird. The doctor, a kind-faced woman, smiled. "It's not what you're thinking, Miss Sterling. You're perfectly healthy. In fact, you're pregnant. About 8 weeks along." The world tilted. The ghost of the hospital bed, the pain, the lonely death. It rose up and then dissipated, blown away by the sheer, shocking joy of the news. A life. A new life, growing in this healthy, strong body in this blessed timeline. I told Ryan that night. He was silent for a full minute, holding me, his face buried in my hair. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "A family," he whispered. "We're going to be a family." Our daughter Luna was born on a stormy September night, all fierce dark eyes and a powerful set of lungs. Holding her, smelling her sweet new scent, I felt a love so vast it terrified me. This was the ultimate creation. This was the future made flesh. Motherhood changed the rhythm of my work, but not its passion. I brought Luna to the factory in a bassinet. Gianna and the seamstresses became her doting aunts. I designed a line of beautiful, practical children's clothes, Sterling Minus, which became a roaring success. Life was not a fairy tale. There were crises, a recession that pinched sales, a counterfeit operation in Asia we had to fight legally, the constant draining pressure of being the figurehead. But the foundation Ryan and I had built together held. We were a team in business and in life. As Luna took her first steps in our sunlit courtyard, I realized the haunting was truly over. The scared ghost of Evelyn Shaw was not just gone. She had been absorbed, transformed into the sinew and soul of Eve Sterling. The past had not won. It had been used as fuel. I had a husband who was my partner, a daughter who was my heart, and a kingdom I had built with my own will. The bright red "just married" sign was ashes, scattered to a wind that now carried the scent of the sea, of success, of a future I had dared to claim. I had not just survived. I had conquered. And as I watched Luna chase a butterfly, her laughter ringing pure and clear, I knew the best chapters of my story were not behind me. They were.